I've said this before. I think my kids and grandkids will price things in Satoshis. How many, that sandwich, oh, that's 5 Satoshis or whatever it is. I just think these other monetary things will go away. And the reason I say that is that, humankind has this history of when you find something better, everyone kind of migrates towards it. It could take time. I mean, this isn't, money touches every part of society, and it's very, very viral, and it's got a huge network effect, and it's got a huge, Lindy effect going backwards, so that the dollar's got tons and tons of momentum. So we're not going to turn this thing over in 5 years or 10 years, but in 20 years, 30 years, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure that that Bitcoin will be kind of the true north monetary standard. When 2008 occurred, what it really was a big socialist experiment for the banks. I mean, the banks should have failed. They should have let everything fail, but of course they took the view that if they did that, the whole economy would enter another depression, and they might have been right, but and so they bailed everything out, and they did it with printed money and 0% interest rates, and we printed money before. They printed money, in the Depression. They printed a little bit in World War II, after World War II, but I mean, this level of printing was just like an entirely new order of magnitude, and they've had 0% interest rates before. They were briefly that low in the Depression, but since that time, they've never been that low, and it's just an enormous distortion of capitalism to do those two things. I mean, it just turns everything it's on its head, and as the book describes, it actually makes the system incredibly unfair to those who aren't, near the money printer or don't have the ability to borrow cheap. I mean, one of the greatly unjust things in our society is that Wall Street can borrow at prime, and sometimes prime is as low as 0 or 1 or 2%, and that the average person has to borrow from these credit card companies that are charging 25%. So it's just usury. I mean, we used to have usury laws. There used to be a cap on how high interest rates could go, but we don't have that anymore either, because frankly the banks own the place. So it's an unfair system, and that really makes me angry, because I see the country I grew up in, and it was a fairer, better country than the one that my 20-year-old kids are growing up in. Yeah, Ron Paul was a key for a lot of us. I was a big supporter of his, and of course everything he did was based on Austrian economics. And so once you go down that direction, you start reading Rothbard and von Mises, and you really kind of understand that, oh my God, we've been living in this broken system that's really kind of a lie. And it started in 1913 with the creation of the Fed, which is really just a money cartel set, with price fixing and to benefit the rich. And then, it got, monstrously worse in 71, because at least until 71, there was some loose link between gold and the dollar. And of course, when Nixon broke that, then all hell broke loose. And one of my favorite charts in the book is early on in the book. There's a chart that shows kind of inflation from 1789 to 1971, and it's going up for sure, but it's little blips, and they tend to be around wars, and they were somewhat self-correcting. And then in 71, the thing just takes off like a rocket ship and goes straight up. Yeah. And so, because when we went on a total fiat money standard, government determined they could print whatever they wanted. There really are just no restraints. I mean, and that's only proven, to be worse and worse. I mean, I thought the COVID print was pretty amazing. I thought the amount they created was amazing. I thought the increase in the expenses was amazing. And what happens, and this is the part that's so interesting, Rob, is it's like a ratchet. It never goes backwards. The expenses that so like in 2008, there's a good example. So 2008, all right, well, we had to save the banks. We had to print this money. We had to drop rates to zero. I get it. Okay, so now it's 2011. The banks aren't close to dying. The economy's kind of working. It's not robust, but it's working. Why are we continuing to keep money at zero? Why are we continuing to do QE? Do you know what I mean? Why aren't we, and the answer is the system's broken, and they wanted to benefit the insiders and reflate the system. And same is true with COVID. I mean, they printed all this money, and they spent a ton of money. The government spending in COVID went up a couple $1 trillion, and you would think, all right, I get that, but maybe after COVID was over, you'd take the spending back down again, right? Because we're not in an emergency anymore. But no, and we ratchet. That's now the new baseline, and it's only going to get bigger. So, it's just it's what Lynn says. I mean, the train isn't stopping, and they just, sadly, the government, the structure of the government we have, is just going to make this thing worse and worse until it kind of completely comes off the rails. And that's because nobody's willing to face the elephant in the room, which is that we're bankrupt. We can't, and we're living off credit cards, and we can't keep spending more and expect it to last.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually, there's a chapter in the book, as you know, called Stein's Law. If something can't go on forever, it's going to end. Well, it feels like we're getting closer and closer to that end point.
Do you think that the Fed is a evil institution, or is it just a bunch of 12 guys sitting there think they're doing the right thing for the country? And
It's mixed. I mean, I think it's evil in the sense that I think they're smart enough to know that they can't do what they're trying to do, and they like the power they have. And when there's a part, where Greenspan says he really enjoyed being the power of being the Fed head, and I'm pretty sure Jerome Powell likes that too. I mean, so I think these guys are too smart not to understand the implications of what they're doing, and that they're kind of working for the insiders, and then post being on the Fed, they go out and they get huge fees. I mean, Janet Yellen gets $7 million of speaking fees. I mean, what does she have to say that's worth $7 million? I mean, that's just kind of a backdoor bribe. So, I mean, first of all, the one thing I will say, some people say, well, what would you have done if you were in the Fed? How could you do it? I mean, nobody, God himself couldn't do the Fed well. I mean, the interest rate should be a market set rate, and what it does is it should balance the supply of savings with the demand for investments. So interest rates should be discovered in the free market. There really shouldn't be, a Federal Reserve. I mean, the whole notion and the fact that there is a Federal Reserve is what got us into all this trouble because, by backstopping the banks, it led to perpetual inflation. It said to the banks, just party on, don't worry about it. If things go wrong, we'll print money to bail you out. And so we've been in kind of a perpetually inflationary environment, which, in the 70s it blew up a lot, but Volcker got it back under control with high interest rates. 80s and 90s, we had some really good productivity gains, and we were, in a deflationary trend in terms of interest rates, so it was less noticeable that we were inflating. But now it's turned the other way, and as in the last cycle we had inflation of 9%. I mean, I think this next cycle up is going to be higher still. So, and I don't see, I mean, if something were changing, if I saw fiscal responsibility in Congress or an adult conversation about saying, we've got to reduce some of these entitlements, or an adult conversation about saying, we're spending way too much on defense. We can accomplish the same objective with less cost. Then I would think, well, all right, maybe it's not, a broken system. Maybe we can fix it. But to be fair, you just don't see any of those things happening. I mean, again, when I was writing the book, I was really last year. As you'll recall, we had a presidential election, and I was watching Team Blue and Team Red argue with each other, and I thought, these guys are arguing about all this stupid stuff that doesn't matter, and, there's a bigger problem here, which is the monetary problem. I mean, you had a debate between Kamala and Trump, and nobody mentioned the debt. I mean, nobody. It's probably the biggest threat to the country right now that exists, and yet it's kind of kicked off into the side of the room, and nobody's talking about it. Even Trump and Warren are saying maybe we should just get rid of the debt limit. And they probably will. I mean, it's always been kind of a joke anyway. But I mean, the point is, they'll try. I mean, witness Doge. I mean, noble effort. Good aims, et cetera, et cetera. But even Elon got fed up with it and said, you just can't do this. I mean, it's just not going to work. It's also just baked in the cake, and it's a very, very broken system. And so I think the history of broken systems like that is they'll run as long as they can until the whole system implodes, and then we'll be forced to restructure it, based on sound money. At least I hope it's based on sound money. If we don't, then the pain's going to continue. A guy gave me a business card with an internet address on it in 1993, and I said, "What's that?" He said, "That's my internet address." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, you know what the internet is?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, imagine if you could, at the time there was something called Novell, which had local area networks. You could hook up your PC to other PCs in your office with a coax cable." He said, "Well, just imagine if you had Novell and you could send email to everywhere in the world." And I was like, holy shit, that's a really big idea. And so I just went and bought everything I could in the internet space, private companies. It worked out very well. But I think, by the way, I think that's helped me in terms of understanding Bitcoin, because I see the parallels are very substantial. They're both networking businesses. There was a lot of skepticism. I remember when I was buying all those things, people were like, what is that? I don't get it. No, you don't need that. I mean, remember what, Krugman said and so forth. So, but I could see that it was going to change the world. It was really going to be an important thing. And so, so there's a certain amount of pattern recognition where, this next network, the monetary network that Bitcoin is establishing, it reminds me so much of the internet. It's almost like deja vu. So, I think what you want to try and find is a technical change that's unique and different, that brings some real value, and then, increased adoption, what I always call dogs eating food. So year over year, more people are using it, implying that it's a good thing. And, and then you get into these adoption curves. I've got a few of them in the book where it just kind of shows, and it goes back quite a ways. I mean, washing machines, cell phones, computers, whatever it might be. You get your early adopters who are testing it, and the things are clunky. It doesn't really work that well. And then it gets better and better, and the technology keeps improving, and pretty soon everybody has it. It's just like obvious. How can you live without a cell phone? The original phones were flip phones. Hell, the original phone was the one that Michael Douglas had in Wall Street with the big brick that he was carrying around on the beach. My boss had one of those, and I remember at the time that the per minute rate was like $1.50. So, and he was an important guy, and occasionally he had to do things, and so he'd get on the phone and he'd make a 10-minute phone call for $15, and from anywhere, and that was cool. And think about what that is today. We all have phones. We can make calls all around the world, for $30 a month. Effectively, it's free almost. So you just kind of look for these technology trends that are emerging and more usage. And in the Bitcoin area, that's one of the things I look at most carefully is how fast is it growing in terms of users, applications, adoption. And I've seen nothing that indicates that it's slowing down. In fact, I would argue it's the other way. It's kind of accelerating, modestly, but accelerating. And so, that tells me that, just let this play itself out. And I think most people in the world now know what they've heard of it. You'd have to be living in a cave. Well, in the Western world, I should say, in the developed world, you'd have to be living in a cave to not be aware that Bitcoin exists. Mm-hmm. But I would say that the people that know that they need it, the percentage of those people who know that it exists, that then also understand that they really need it. Still, what has it got to be? 1%, 2%, 5%? It's small, right? Yeah. And I think that what's going to happen is, the part that doesn't know they need it, they're going to learn that they need it. And so as they do, and because, we've got this, it's fixed in supply, as as everyone knows, and nobody's ever seen anything like this before, because all the commodities, the supply will grow if the price goes up. Well, this is one where the price will go up and the supply won't grow. Mm-hmm. The supply is algorithmically set at 21 million coins. Price will go to wherever. It doesn't matter. There aren't any more of them. So yeah, that's why I think Saylor's insight that it's going up forever, Laura, to me, that's one of the hardest things for people who are looking at it for the first time to get their arms around. I can't tell you how many friends I have who say, well, yeah, I know I should have bought it, but I didn't. You told me to, I didn't. But you bought it at 10,000, it's 100. How can I pay 100 for it? I'm paying too much. I'm like, you're looking at it wrong. I paid 10,000 for it. Max Kaiser bought it at $1. And in 10 years, if you buy it at 100 and it's at $1 million, somebody's gonna say, oh shit, I can't pay $1 million for it. You paid 100,000 for it.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of the beast. Jeff Booth is a very strong believer that he's a friend, and he's a very strong believer that we've absolutely got to get the medium of exchange piece going, because it just gets it inside everybody's head. To be frank, I'm kind of with Saylor right now. It's just pristine digital capital. It's digital gold. The medium of exchange thing isn't that important, but so I can see both sides of this argument. I think that it will become, first of all, it's growing as a medium of exchange. All the Bitcoin shows I go to, I just buy things out of my Strike wallet, on Lightning. And you're seeing more and more medium of exchange use cases. So and in third world countries, actually, it's pretty heavily used as a medium of exchange. There's a part of my book where I talk about Nairobi, where, they've got a terrible currency, and a lot of people are conducting their lives on a Bitcoin standard, using Lightning wallets. So it is there. The medium of exchange piece is there. And I think it will continue to grow as time goes by. And I think that it's just another way that it'll creep into everybody's consciousness. And I think eventually it will be the medium of exchange. I think eventually the dollar will be gone. It'll be kind of a relic. And I've said this before. I think my kids and grandkids will price things in Satoshis. How many, that sandwich, that's 5 Satoshis or whatever it is. I just think these other monetary things will go away. And the reason I say that is that, humankind has this history of when you find something better, everyone kind of migrates towards it. And, now, it could take time. This isn't, money touches every part of society, and it's very, very viral, and it's got a huge network effect, and it's got a huge, Lindy effect going backwards, so that the dollar's got tons and tons of momentum. So we're not going to turn this thing over in 5 years or 10 years, but in 20 years, 30 years, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure that that Bitcoin will be kind of the true north monetary standard. Whenever anybody accepts Bitcoin, I pay in Bitcoin, and then I replace it with I take fiat from my. I mean, obviously we all have fiat accounts. You can't really live paying for everything in Bitcoin. It's very hard to do. But it's very easy to take my fiat, send it to my Strike wallet, and buy more Bitcoin. So yeah, I try to use it whenever possible, and I try and I use it to orange pill people. I mean, I try to people who don't get it. I mean, I find myself in a lot of service institutions, restaurants particularly, where I say, well, I'm going to give you the tip, and here's, put on the credit card, but I'd like to give you a little extra tip if you learn about Bitcoin, right? And they said, what is it? Well, okay, so you got a phone? Yeah, okay. So here, download this Strike wallet. Okay, set it up. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Great. I'm going to send you $5 worth of Bitcoin to your Strike wallet right now. And it just plants the seed, right? And they're kind of like, oh, that's interesting. How'd you do that? How'd that happen so fast? What right? I mean, it's so. Again, it's to me, we're racing because fiat and CBDCs are making the world a terrible place, and the governments are trying to push CBDCs, and we're kind of in a race with them. So we got to get as much of the world as possible to see our side of it and be using our side of it and recognize that this is the right way to go. I mean, as you alluded to those socialists who think the problem is, not enough government. We gotta show them, no, the problem is too much government. And here's how you beat it.
Imagine a world where, I don't know, your morning coffee, maybe even a car, isn't priced in dollars or pounds, but in Satoshis. These tiny bits of Bitcoin.
Yeah, it sounds pretty sci-fi for a lot of people, right?
Totally. But what if it's not just some fantasy? What if it's actually, well, an inevitable future? Predicted by people who've spent decades really digging into how money works.
It's a vision that really challenges, our basic ideas about money, about value. It's not just about some new digital coin popping up.
Right.
It suggests a deeper shift, almost like how humanity's always managed wealth and trade, historically.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is the show where we cut through all the noise, we take articles, research our own notes, and we boil it all down to the core insights.
Our goal is really to give you a shortcut to being genuinely informed, maybe find some surprising facts, and hopefully keep you hooked.
Exactly. And today, this is episode number 35 of the Market Chronicles, and it's a crucial deep dive. We're looking at the insights of Lawrence Lepard.
Specifically his, let's say, provocative comments on the future of money and, well, the state of the current financial system.
Our mission is to unpack what he's claiming and figure out what it actually means for you.
And his perspective, it's really rooted in Austrian economics, free markets, individual action, and a very critical eye on modern monetary policy. So that leads him to this really strong conviction about Bitcoin's potential. It bridges old economic ideas with a pretty bold digital future.
And hey, if you're watching on YouTube right now, quick reminder, hit that subscribe button. You definitely don't want to miss our future deep dives.
Okay, so let's jump in. Lepard's vision, Bitcoin as the true North monetary standard.
Yeah, that's the phrase he uses. He paints this picture. His kids and grandkids will price things in Satoshis, like a sandwich costing 5 Satoshis.
Right, very tangible examples. And for him, it's not just guessing. He sees it as like the next logical step in how humans have always moved towards something better for money. Barter shells, gold.
But he's also realistic about the timing, right?
Yeah.
He's not saying this happens tomorrow.
No, definitely not. He fully gets the dollar's inertia. That Lindy effect. The longer it's around, the longer it's likely to stay around, and its massive network effect.
Everyone uses it, so everyone keeps using it.
Exactly. So he's not talking 5 years or 10 years. It's more like 20 years, 30 years out. But he believes eventually Bitcoin becomes that standard. That long view is quite distinctive.
What I find really interesting is the parallel he draws with the early internet.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. He talks about getting a business card in, 93? With an internet address on it.
And people were just like, what is that? I don't get it.
Right. Total skepticism. But he saw it as this unique technical change that brought real value. He figured adoption would just happen. He calls it dogs eating food.
Oh, yeah. Like it just works, so people use it.
It's that pattern recognition. Think about washing machines, cell phones, computers. They all started clunky, niche. Yeah, and then they improved and became essential. He sees Bitcoin's user growth, the application growth, as accelerating, not slowing down. Same kind of path.
But there's a difference between just knowing Bitcoin exists and really getting why you might need it.
That's a crucial distinction he makes. He says most people in the West are aware, sure, but maybe only 1%, 2%, 5% truly understand why they really need it.
Need it for what, though? Protection against.
Well, partly protection, partly utility. He thinks that deeper understanding, probably driven by economic realities, is what will push wider adoption.
And a huge part of that understanding is grasping the scarcity, right? The fixed supply.
Absolutely. 21 million coins set by the algorithm. That's it. It's, like he says, nobody's ever seen anything like this before with commodities. Usually price goes up, miners dig up more.
Not with Bitcoin.
Nope. Vertical supply curve. And that's why it's so hard for people used to traditional economics to wrap their heads around the potential for its price to just keep rising over the long term.
So is it digital gold, like Money Sailor argues, just pristine capital? Or is the becoming actual money, a medium of exchange, like Jeff Booth might say?
Lepard leans towards the medium of exchange idea gaining ground. He mentions using the Strike wallet himself, Lightning Network, for fast, cheap payments.
Okay, so personal experience.
Yeah, but also what's happening in, say, third world countries, his term, like parts of Nairobi, people are literally living on a Bitcoin standard because their local currency is failing them. It's practical.
He even talks about orange pilling people, right? Giving tips in Bitcoin.
Yeah, using Strike. It's a simple thing, giving an extra tip to a server in Bitcoin, but makes them go, wait, how'd you do that? How is that so fast?
It plants a seed. A real-world demo is way better than just talking about it.
And he frames this whole shift as a kind of race. Bitcoin versus fiat currencies, and especially CBDCs, central bank digital currencies.
Which he sees as tools for control.
Exactly. He thinks they're making the world a terrible place, eroding freedom and purchasing power. For him, Bitcoin is proof that the problem is too much government, particularly in money.
Speaking of the current system, he really doesn't hold back on the 2008 crisis response.
Oh, not at all. He calls the bank bailouts a big socialist experiment for the banks. Flat out says they should have failed.
Let creative destruction happen.
Right. Instead, they got propped up with printed money and 0% interest rates. A new order of magnitude of printing. He calls it an enormous distortion of capitalism.
And incredibly unfair, he argues, for anyone not near the money printer.
Yeah, that disparity is huge. Wall Street borrows basically for free, 0 to 2%, while the average person gets hit with usury rates like 25% on credit cards.
He points out the lack of real usury laws anymore. Basically says the banks own the place.
It's a harsh assessment, and it comes from his background in Austrian economics. Ron Paul Rothbard Mises thinkers, who led him to see the system as fundamentally broken.
Almost kind of a lie, is how he puts it.
Yeah. And he traces the origin of this broken system back to 1913, the creation of the Federal Reserve.
Which he calls a money cartel, designed to help the rich.
That's his view. And he says it got monstrously worse in 71. Nixon breaking the dollar's last link to gold, that's when all hell broke loose.
He has that chart right, showing inflation.
Oh yeah, his favorite chart. Inflation from 1789 to 1971 is just little bumps, mostly around wars, then it kind of self-corrects.
But after 71?
After 71, the thing just takes off like a rocket ship and goes straight up. Total fiat standard, no restraints on government printing. Just think what that does to your savings over time.
Yeah, it's a stark visual. And it leads to what he calls the ratchet effect.
Meaning government spending, once it goes up, never goes backwards. It just clicks higher.
Like after 2008, rates stayed at 0, QE kept going, even when the economy was supposedly recovering.
Exactly. Into 2011. And after COVID, trillions in spending just became the new baseline. The debt just piles up.
So his conclusion is pretty blunt. The U.S. is bankrupt.
Essentially, yeah. Living off credit cards, unwilling to face the elephant in the room. He quotes Stein's law. If something can't go on forever, it's going to end.
And we're getting closer to that endpoint, in his view.
Closer and closer. Which brings up the question of the Fed's intentions. Are they naive or...
He's kind of mixed, but lean cynical, right? He thinks they're smart enough to know the implications.
Yeah, and that they enjoy the power, he mentions Greenspan, Powell, and that they work for insiders who cash in later. He points to Janet Yellen getting millions in speaking fees after leaving the Fed, calls it a backdoor bribe.
So what's his solution to stop this perpetual inflation?
Simple, at least in theory. Interest rates should be a market set rate, balancing savings and investment demand naturally.
So no Fed.
Basically, yeah. There really shouldn't be a Federal Reserve. He argues its existence, just backstopping the banks, causes the perpetual inflation, The market would provide discipline.
He looks back at the 70s inflation. Volcker stepping in.
Right, which was painful but necessary. Then the 80s and 90s had productivity gains that masked inflation a bit. But the last cycle, inflation hit 9%.
Yeah, he thinks the next one will be worse.
He predicts the next cycle up is going to be higher still. And he's just frustrated by the total lack of fiscal responsibility in Congress. No adult conversation about entitlements, defense spending, nothing.
Politics focuses on, as he says, stupid stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah, while ignoring the biggest threat, the national debt. He notes it wasn't even mentioned in recent presidential debates. Nobody wants to touch it.
So the system just keeps running until it breaks.
That seems to be his conclusion. It runs until it implodes, and then hopefully we get a restructure based on sound money.
Wow. Okay, so we've really dug into Lawrence Lepard's warnings here. The fragility of the current system, his vision for Bitcoin as this sound money alternative. It's unsettling, but definitely makes you think.
Absolutely. Lepard's insights really push you to consider the long view. If he's right, if this financial train isn't stopping, well, what does that mean for you personally?
Yeah, how do you prepare for that kind of potential restructure?
And what role does just understanding this stuff play in maybe shifting things? It's definitely a lot to think about, and maybe a future that's closer than we think.